Hello everyone, welcome to the InStyle Knitting Studio. In this video, I want to tell you how I knitted this basic jumper. It was knitted in a raglan style from the bottom up, with a small rise and underarms. Overall, it's quite simple to knit. In this video, I will explain everything in detail. We will manage without any complicated knitting techniques. However, by listening to me and watching all my notes and calculations, you would definitely be able to knit such a jumper in any size you want. Therefore, if you are interested, please stay tuned. Let's get started. I used this type of yarn. It was a blend. This thread consists of 3 strands, 2 white and 1 beige. It's likely a mix of viscose and acrylic. I can't say for sure. I also included this thread with little bumps, which is boucle yarn. So, I knitted with 4 thin strands. I believe the density will be approximately 100 grams, 150 to 200 meters. I used 530 grams for the entire jumper. I used 3.5 and 4.25 millimeter needles on a long cable. My cable is very long, 120 centimeters, including the needles. You can also use a slightly shorter one. I would recommend using shorter needles on a cable for easier neck shaping. We will also need a hook of about this size, scissors, and 4 markers. One in a different color to mark the beginning of the row. Needle stoppers, in case you want to pause your knitting, to prevent stitches from slipping. A blunt-ended needle, a measuring tape, a notebook with a pen for calculations. An extra thread, to temporarily hold the stitches. A calculator, and a row counter. The row counter is not essential. My jumper is knitted in size 44 to 46. Here, I have schematically shown all my measurements in centimeters. So, before knitting, we measure the bust circumference with the measuring tape. I have 92 centimeters, but I took a bust circumference of 90 centimeters. That is, a couple of centimeters less than needed. The half bust circumference is 45 centimeters. We took that measurement, and after that, we knit a sample with the pattern, with which we will knit the entire sweater for me, that is stockinette stitch with size 4.5 needles. So, you read your knitting gauge, that is, how many stitches per centimeter and how many rows per centimeter. I explain this in more detail in my lesson. Here is a link above. Go ahead and watch so you calculated your knitting gauge. After that, what do? We take the bust circumference, that measurement, and multiply it by the number of stitches per centimeter. We get rounded to 172 stitches. This is the number of stitches we will initially cast on. We will knit the raglan from the bottom up. That is, the sweater is knitted from the bottom up. Here is our number of stitches that we should initially cast on. I take this width the same as my half bust circumference. 172 stitches must be a multiple of 4. Why? Because here, I will have a 2x2 rib. If you knit a 1x1 rib, then that number must be a multiple of 2. After that, with size 3.5 needles, a smaller size, I will knit the entire fabric with 4.5 needles, while the rib will be knitted with 3.5 needles. I cast on that number of stitches we obtained, plus 1 stitch to join the knitting in the round. When joining in the round, this stitch gets subtracted. Here is also a link to a lesson on how to join knitting in the round. And we have 172 stitches left, and we continue knitting a 2x2 rib. 15 rounds in total. That is about 5 centimeters, by the way. When knitting the rib in the first round, we knit both knit and purl stitches through the front loop. In the second and all subsequent rounds of the rib, we knit the knit stitches through the front loop, and the purl stitches through the back loop. I knitted all the stitches with the grandmother's method. After we knitted the rib, we switched to 4.25 needles and knit further, using knit stitches in stockinette stitch, but before Here's how to knit the entire fabric. Right here after the ribbing, I added a few stitches. I took the total number of stitches, which I was just knitting while creating the ribbing, 172 stitches, and divided by 6 increases. So, I decided that I would have 6 increases. This resulted in this number. I subtracted 1 from 28. Here, you always need to subtract 1, and I wrote here 27 knit stitches. After that, I wrote increase, put everything in brackets, and repeated it 6 times because I will have 6 increases. Now we calculate 27 knit stitches plus 2 stitches, because here is an increase, yes, instead of 1, already 2, and we multiply everything by 6. It results in 174 stitches, but I had 172 and I want to add 6. This means 178 from 178 stitches. I subtract what I got, and I still lack 4 stitches. Therefore, I am adding 4 more stitches to this scheme. This is my algorithm for knitting the next row, that is, the first row with knit stitches. After the ribbing, I will knit the first row with increases. It will be knitted according to this scheme. This means I will knit 27 knit stitches, make an increase, and repeat these brackets 6 times. After that, I will knit 4 plain stitches, and I will have 178 stitches on the needles instead of 172, meaning 6 stitches will be added. If you decide to add not 6 stitches, but another number, you can easily calculate it yourself, I think. So, after knitting the ribbing, we will make increases in the next row with larger needles, with which we will knit the entire fabric. Following this algorithm that you calculated, by the way, I made the increases from the yarn overs. You can do it differently. And in the first row where I make increases, I knit the knit stitches through the front loop and the purl stitches through the back loop. All the knit stitches are knitted as knit stitches now. After knitting the first row and making the increases, we have 178 stitches on the needles, and after that, we simply continue knitting the fabric. We knit upwards straight around with knit stitches. In stockinette stitch, I have knitted 90 rows with 178 stitches in each row. Here, after the ribbing, we made an increase in 1 row and then just knit straight up to the underarm area. It results in 32 centimeters in height from the ribbing. Together with the ribbing, it is 37 centimeters right here. After we finish knitting up to the underarm area, we leave this fabric. We can transfer it to an extra thread. Or you can leave it on the needles if you have 2 pairs of the same size, because for now we leave the body and start knitting the sleeve. We will knit it from the bottom up. To start, we will make some calculations. We need to find out the circumference of the wrist. That is, we measure the circumference here with a measuring tape. I have 15 centimeters, but I added 4 centimeters for a loose fit. You can add a little less or a little more. Look, Sanya. So, 15 plus 4 equals 19 centimeters. Therefore, I will calculate the initial number of stitches based on 19 centimeters. We multiply by our gauge, 19 by 1.91, and we get this number. I rounded it to 36 stitches. This number should also be a multiple of 4, since we will start with a ribbing of 2 by 2 here again. So it must be a multiple of 4. After that, what do we measure? We measure the circumference of the arm at the top. Here's our armpit. The circumference of the arm is right here. We measured the circumference of the arm here. I have 29 centimeters. I didn't add any centimeters here. I just calculated how many stitches that would be. I multiplied by my gauge and got 56 stitches. I actually have 55 here, if rounding, but I decided to take 56 stitches. So we calculated how many stitches we will initially cast on, and how many stitches we need to have at the end of our sleeve. Next, we will figure out the length of the sleeve. The length of the sleeve is this part from the armpit to the ribbing, plus the height of the ribbing. So, the ribbing is about 5 centimeters, just like with the body. Here it is about 5 centimeters. So we multiply 5 centimeters by our gauge. I get 14, but I took 15 rows of ribbing. So, here the ribbing will be 15 rows. The length of the sleeve excluding the ribbing is 40 centimeters. Multiplied by the knitting density, 2.8, we get 112 rows. Therefore, the total length of the sleeve is 112 rows plus 15 rows of ribbing. Thus, we initially cast on 36 stitches on needle size 3.5 plus 1 stitch. Then when we join the knitting in the round, we remove this stitch and there are 36 stitches remaining. Next, we knit ribbing 2 by 2, 15 rows in the round. That is about 5 centimeters. Then we change to needle size 425 and knit in stockinette stitch the entire sleeve from the ribbing up to the underarm area, making gradual increases. Now we need to decide how you will make the increases. In other words, what your sleeve will look like. Often, increases are made gradually. That is, to make the sleeve increase evenly along the entire length. Therefore, I will now tell you how to make increases so that the sleeve increases evenly. Look, we have such calculations. That is, we calculated how many stitches we will have at the end of our sleeve at the top. At the underarm area, there will be 56 stitches. We should end up with this number on the needles. And we cast on 36 stitches. So, from the final number of stitches, 56, we subtract the initial number we cast on, 36. We get 20 stitches. That is, we need to add 20 stitches. Make 20 increases. We take these 20 increases. Dividing by 2 gives us 10 rows. Thus, we will have 10 rows with increases. Because in one row we have 2 increases. We take the total number of rows excluding the ribbing. 112 rows. We divide into rows with increases, we get this number and again we take the whole number, 11. We subtract 1, we write 10 rows. Next we write 1 row with increases. I simply wrote increase. Here, 1 row with increases is implied. In 1 row, 2 increases, don't forget. We take all this in parentheses and repeat it 10 times. Because we have 10 rows with increases, and we calculate 10 plus 1 row. 11 multiplied by 10 repetitions. 110 rows. But we need to knit 112 rows, because we counted here. We take 112 rows, minus 110. It turns out we still need to knit 2 rows to this pattern. We rewrite this pattern plus 2 rows. 112 rows. The same amount we need for such a sleeve length at 40 centimeters, without considering the ribbing. This is for those who want the sleeve to increase. I did it differently. If anyone is interested, here I wrote the algorithm for knitting my sleeve. That is, I just tried the sleeve on my arm. I was just deciding at what moment I would make the increase. So look, I knitted 12 rows after the ribbing right here with 36 stitches. Then, I have an increase in the next row. After that, I knitted 6 rows straight. And I repeated this 3 times. As a result, I ended up with 42 stitches on the needles. After that, I again make an increase in the next row. Then, 4 rows straight. I repeated this 3 times again. I now have 48 stitches on the needles. In the next row, there is an increase. In each row with increases, we have 2 increases. There are 50 stitches on the needles. After that, I knitted 15 rows straight on 50 stitches. In the next row, there is an increase. It turned out to be 52 stitches. I knitted straight for 6 rows on 52 stitches. Then, there is again an increase in the next row. And 4 rows straight. I repeated this 2 times. On the needles, there were 56 stitches. After that, I knitted 31 rows straight on 56 stitches. Here are 56 stitches. And now, I reached a circumference of the arm of 29 centimeters. 56 stitches, and I knitted 112 rows. Having knitted this way, I finished one sleeve. Knitting up to the underarm area with this whole length. We leave the stitches open, either on the needles or on an extra thread. And we knit the second sleeve in the same way. After we already have 3 pieces, 2 sleeves and the body, we must connect all of this and begin to knit the yoke, making raglan lines. Knitting and making decreases up to our neckline. And now we decide whether we will have a gusset here. A gusset is a couple of stitches right here under the arms, or many knit just without gussets, not bothering. But I made gussets. I used 6 stitches for one gusset. You can take a little more. It might not be wise to take less for such a size. Again, you need to look at your knitting density. So, here is how I did it. I transferred 6 stitches of the body onto an extra needle. They are open for me. And 6 stitches of the sleeve as well. The knitted stitch we knitted straight, while making increases on the sides, so that this central stitch is also in the center of these 6 stitches here, like this. So, we transferred our stitches onto 2 extra needles. The right side inwards. We align the right side to the right side and start using a hook. It is more convenient for me to sew these 6 stitches here and there with a hook. Yes, to sew together using a shoulder seam and simultaneously close these 6 stitches. How to do this, I explain in detail in my lesson. The link, check it out above. My working yarn was from the body. And the last stitch we had left after closing, I also decreased. We do not cut the yarn and keep knitting. This is my back. So, look, I have 178 stitches for the body. I subtracted 2 underarm stitches, because one is here, and the second will be there. Yes, I subtracted 2 underarm stitches of 6 stitches each, and it turned out to be 166 stitches. This is my body. And I take 166 stitches and divide them into 2 parts of 83 stitches each. This results in the front and the back. So look, after we connected one sleeve, we knit the back. I have 83 stitches for the back, I counted. Yes, and then we connect the second sleeve. That is, we also make the connection at the underarms, and then knit the front of 83 stitches. We reach the beginning of the row. This is the point between the front and the first sleeve. Here, we will then count how many stitches we will have in total. This will be after we connect the body with the sleeves. How many stitches will we initially have on our yoke? So, first, let's sort out the body. We are deciding how many stitches will go into one raglan line. For me, that is 2 stitches. It turns out, there are 83 stitches for the back and 83 stitches for the front. From these, we need to allocate 2 stitches for the raglan line. Here, for example, look. Here is the raglan line. And here, for each raglan line, there are 2 stitches. So, let's say this raglan line has 2 stitches. 1 stitch from the 2 will go to the front, and the second stitch from the 2 will go to the sleeve. The same goes for here. From 83 stitches of the back or front, we subtract 2 stitches for the raglan line. We get 81 stitches. Accordingly, we allocate 81 stitches for the front and 81 stitches for the back. Yes, now let's also figure out the sleeves. Now we consider one sleeve. Subtracting 6 stitches for the underarm, we get 50 stitches. Also for the raglan line, we have 2 stitches. Therefore, from one sleeve, we subtract another 2 stitches that will go to the raglan lines. We get 48 stitches. So there will be 48 stitches for one sleeve. Here I wrote 48 and multiplied by 2 sleeves. And plus all the raglan lines added together, we get 266 stitches. That is how many stitches we will have here. On our entire yoke, at the beginning of knitting the raglan from the bottom, of course, we subtracted these underarms. From this, we start knitting the raglan from the bottom up. In the first row, we knit in stockinette and also place markers on the raglan line. I place the markers in such a way that there is one marker for each raglan line. That is, I place a marker between these two stitches of one raglan line, where I have the beginning of the row, where the first raglan line is. I usually take a marker of a different color. This is necessary for me to see where my beginning of the row is. And here, between the sleeve and the back, or the sleeve and the front, 1 or 2 stitches can be added, as there are gaps formed between the underarms and the sleeve. But I did not add those couple of stitches here. They will, respectively, add to the total number of stitches. I just have these holes left near the cuts. At the end of the knitting, I simply sewed them up with a thread. We make decreases before and after each raglan line. We have 4 of them. You can decrease in any way that is comfortable for you. I did it this way. I knitted 1 stitch before the raglan line and 1 stitch of the raglan line itself. I knitted them together through the front loop. Then I knitted the second stitch of the raglan line and 1 stitch of the sleeve together as well, but before that, I turned them around and then knitted them together through the back loop. So, in one row, I had 8 decreases. Usually, for example, 2 stitches are decreased before the raglan line knitted together with the left tilt, and 2 stitches after the raglan line are knitted together with a right tilt. After that, we need to decide how many rows, how many we will knit the row with the decreases. Here too you need, I don't know, to try on or somehow calculate. Everyone has their own methods. Everyone has their own figure, their own knitting density, their own model of the sweater. All of this affects the number of rows. I did more by trying on the sweater. Therefore, I will show you my algorithm for knitting. I make decreases, but I will say right away that perhaps yours will not turn out like mine, most often probably. Decreases are made every row. Some knit this first half, making decreases here every 2 rows, that is, in every 3rd row. And then they start making decreases in every 2nd row. So, here you also need to count how much height you need, how many rows you need to knit for the back, and what width of the neckline you ultimately need to get here. I place the marker. Yes, just straight. Then I knitted a row with decreases. The next row, straight. And so I repeated 1 row with decreases and 1 row straight. I repeated this 4 times. I had 234 stitches on the needles. Decreases were only on the front and back. That is, here is the decrease made before the raglan line, and here is after the raglan line. I did not decrease on the sleeves, but it seemed to me that this would be fine, that is, just to decrease only the body, while not decreasing the sleeves. I alternated 3 times. I had 198 stitches on my needles. After that, I knitted 2 rows straight, and in the next row I made a decrease. So, my decreases are in front and after each raglan line. I repeated this 5 times. It resulted in 138 stitches. Next, I knitted 2 rows straight with 138 stitches. My next row had decreases on the front and back. It turned out 134 stitches on the needles, that's it. After that, I started to knit the gusset. But first, we will distribute our stitches left after knitting the raglan from the bottom up onto the sleeves, back and front. So, 8 stitches go on the raglan line, 2 stitches for each side. This means, from 134 stitches, we need to subtract 8. This gives us 126 stitches. Next, I count how many stitches I have on the front. I have marked these sections with markers. Therefore, I count how many I have on the front and back. I have 41 stitches. I subtract 2 stitches from the raglan lines. For example, 1 stitch from this raglan line belongs to the front, and 1 stitch from the second raglan line belongs to the front. I subtract 2 stitches. I get 39 stitches for the front and 39 stitches for the back, the same for the sleeves. 26 stitches, I subtract 2 stitches. This gives 24 stitches for 1 sleeve and 24 stitches for 2. Then, I add 39 plus 24 and multiply by 2. I get 126 stitches. 126 stitches plus the raglan line plus 8. We get 134 stitches we have distributed. After that, we decide how high our gusset will be. That is, we decide how much higher the back will be here at the neckline than the front. I decided that for the child's model my sprout will be about 4 centimeters tall. Thus, we knit the sprout. Here, for instance, the start of my row is located at the point between the front and the first sleeve. And how are we going to knit the sprout? The main principle. Here are the turning points. I will talk about them a bit later, but for now, I will just roughly explain how this is done. The sprout is knitted with turning rows. That is, with knit stitches and purl stitches alternately. So, we knit stockinette stitch but constantly turn around. That means, look, my sprout is 4 centimeters. I multiply by my knitting density that we calculated at the beginning. In 1 centimeter, there are 2.5 rows. I multiply by the density and get 11 2/10 rows. I round to an even number. That is 12 rows. Here, the number must definitely be even. So, I have 12 rows. It is necessary to knit this to achieve a height of 4 centimeters for the sprout. The back will be knitted continuously while working on the sprout. The sleeves and the front will be knitted several times. So, look, the start of the row. We knit the first row with knit stitches. Just like this, the sleeve, the back, the second sleeve, and we grab a few stitches from the front. How many this is, I will explain a bit later. For now, I am just describing the principle. A little bit of front stitches, then the stitches from the sleeve, the back, the sleeve, and a few front stitches up to this point. Again, we turn and knit with knit stitches. We knit all of this up to this point. That is, we're leaving a little bit unknitted. That is, we're knitting slightly less of the front. Again, we turn. We are knitting already with purl stitches up to this point. Then we turn around and so on. Up to the turning points, we will knit fewer and fewer stitches, knitting the stitches of the front and the sleeves, until there are only the back stitches left. That makes it pretty clear here. Let's return to the calculations. For me to knit 4 centimeters of the growth, I need to knit 12 rows. We take these 12 rows and divide them by the sleeves. This means we need to find out how many turning points we will have for the sleeves. And we also need to decide whether we will knit the front stitches. Since the growth is sometimes knitted simply gradually, knitting the sleeve stitches while leaving the front completely untouched. They just knit the sleeves. I will knit and also finish a few stitches of the front here. Therefore, I take 12 rows and divide them into 2 parts. Yes, for 2 sleeves. I get 6 turning points. But I want to also pay some attention to the front to knit. So I take 4 points for 1 sleeve. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 turning points. And the 5th and 6th point will go to the front. If you don't want to touch the front, but just knit the sleeves and the back, then all 6 points will be on 1 sleeve. I divided 4 points for the sleeve, and 2 points for the front on this side. Similarly here, 4 points for the sleeve and 5 and 6 points for the front. Now let's sort out the decreases. We are knitting the growth, and generally the raglan from the bottom up. Therefore, we make decreases on the raglan lines before and after the raglan line each time. And now let's figure out how many stitches will be left for the back, the front, and the sleeves after we knit the growth of 4 centimeters. So let's start with the back. Here, I marked it for myself. So we knit the back, all 12 rows, as the back should be the highest. And that includes 6 rows with decreases. Since we will have decreases in each knit row, that is, every other row, half of the rows, 6 rows will have decreases. We take these 6 rows and multiply by 2 decreases. Why by 2? Because while knitting the back and making decreases, we will have decreases right here before the raglan line and right here before the raglan line. That is, we relate 2 decreases to the back. 6 rows multiplied by 2 decreases gives us 12 decreases. After that, we subtract 12 stitches from the number of stitches for the back. With 12 decreases, we get 27 stitches. Thus, after we knit the growth section of 4 centimeters and make the decreases, we will have 27 stitches left for the back. What about the front? For the front, we will not knit 12 rows, but we only have 2 turning points here. That is, we knit 1 row, turn, the second, third, and fourth. We will knit 4 rows. This consists of 2 rows with decreases, since the decreases happen every other row. 2 rows multiplied by 2 decreases. Why by 2? Because we will make a decrease here and here. We get 4 decreases. We will decrease 4 stitches and start with 39 stitches from the front. Subtracting 4 stitches, we get 35 stitches. Thus, after we knit the growth section of 4 centimeters, we will have 35 stitches for the front. Now, let's deal with the sleeves. We will consider 1 sleeve. So, how will we knit the growth section? From the beginning of the row, we will knit all of this, picking up stitches from the front. We turn until this point turn, and we will not finish knitting a little, we will turn and not finish knitting again. After that, we will only begin working on the sleeve stitches, gradually decreasing in this manner. Thus, while knitting the front stitches, we will naturally make decreases on the sleeves, only in the right side rows. Since we will knit 4 rows, capturing the front stitches, 2 rows, as we have already understood, will have decreases. Therefore, 2 rows multiplied by 2 decreases, because for 1 sleeve, we will have a decrease here, and right here. 2 rows multiplied by 2 decreases gives us 4 decreases for 1 sleeve. This is while knitting, reaching the front. After that, we will simply knit the back and sleeve stitches without reaching the front. Here we go, not reaching this and this raglan line. Therefore, for 1 sleeve, we will have 1 decrease right here. How many rows we will knit like this, creating the stitches for the sleeve and back? 1, 2, 3, 4 rows with decreases. 4 rows multiplied by 1 decrease. This results in 4 decreases for 1 sleeve. Thus, 4 decreases while knitting the front stitches, yes, we will have it. 4 decreases while knitting the sleeve stitches, 4 plus 4 gives us 8 decreases. Creating our growth on 1 sleeve. Let's multiply 8 decreases by 2 sleeves, since we have 2. Which gives us 16 decreases for the sleeves. We take 24 stitches for 1 sleeve. We subtract 8 decreases from 1 sleeve. This results in 16 stitches. After creating the growth, we will have 16 stitches for 1 sleeve. Now we will count how many decreases we will have in total. If we knit 12 rows of growth, then here we have 12 decreases for the back, plus 4 decreases for the front, plus 16 decreases for 2 sleeves, results in 32 decreases. Furthermore, I wrote here that we had 12 rows of growth in total. We make decreases every other row. That is 6 rows with decreases. Here, look at how we can check our calculations. 32 decreases. We will have 6 rows with decreases. Here, I redrew our neckline. 6 rows means 2 rows will be larger. For example, we will knit from the beginning of the row. Here is the large row, knitting up to the front stitches. We will turn around. In the second row, we knit up to this point. The third row is knitted up to here. The fourth up to this point. That is, 4 rows or 2 rows with decreases. Yes, we will knit large ones. We will have decreases everywhere, here and here, everywhere. That is, 8 decreases per 1 row. We will have 2 such rows. We multiply by 8 decreases in 1 row. Here are those parentheses we got. Next, after we capture the front stitches, we will just knit, capturing the sleeve stitches, gradually decreasing to the number of stitches. So, we will not knit up to those points anymore. There will be no decreases here. How many decreases will we have in 1 row? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 decreases in 1 row. And how many rows will we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. There will be a total of 8 rows, but with decreases 4. So, 4 rows multiplied by 4 decreases. Here are our second parentheses. If we add these 2 parentheses, we get 32 decreases, just as we counted. Next, I wrote the total number of stitches we had after knitting the raglan, 134 stitches. We subtract our decreases, 12 decreases on the back, 4 decreases on the front, and 16 decreases on both sleeves. That gives us 102 stitches. That is, after all our decreases, we will have 102 stitches on the needles. We can check again how many stitches we have left. After the back decrease, we will have 27 stitches left, plus 35 stitches remaining after the front decreases, and plus 16 stitches for the sleeves. Plus 8 stitches for the raglan lines. That gives us 102 stitches. Everything is clear here. Yes, there were 134 stitches. 32 stitches were decreased, and we will have 102 stitches left on the needles. I have rewritten here how many stitches I will have left for the sleeves and the back. For the sleeves, there will be 16, for the back 27, and for the front 35. Now we will figure out how many stitches we will not knit here. We constantly know that there will be 4 turning points here. Where we will turn, there are 2 points here. The same goes for this side. But how many stitches? Why didn't we count this earlier? Because as we will decrease, we should have several stitches. Extra here, you might find this a bit hard to understand right now, but I'm just telling you that these calculations we are about to do. We will calculate how many stitches we should have here. All of this needs to be counted only after we find out how many decreases we will have. After our decreases, we write down here the number of stitches that will remain after the decreases. And only after that do we make calculations to figure out how many stitches we need to not knit here. We take one sleeve, divide 16 stitches by 4 turning points, and get 4 stitches each. For the front, we divide it into 3 parts. My front stitches do not divide evenly, resulting in 11 stitches, 12 and 12, so I take 11 for the central part. We usually do not knit the central part when making the yoke, so I will leave 11 stitches here and have 12 stitches for these parts. We divide 12 by 2 since we have 2 turning points. Here it results in 6 stitches each. Here we write, well, that's all the calculations. So, overall, what do we do? After we have knitted the yoke from the bottom to the top, we get a specific number of stitches on the needles. We distribute these stitches onto the back, front and sleeves, as well as on the raglan lines, and figure out the decreases. That is, we decide how tall our yoke will be, convert it into rows, and see how many decreases we will have for the front, back, and sleeves. We calculated all of this, how many decreases there will be and how many stitches will remain in all these parts. We redraw the diagram, noting what stitches will remain. Only after this do we count how many stitches we need to not knit at the turning points. That's it. After this, we can knit the yoke. By the way, I also marked here. Each time we turn the knitting, yes, we make a yarn over and then just calmly knit on. And then we knit this yarn over together with the adjacent stitch that is standing. The stitch that stands next to the yarn over is slightly separated from it. Therefore, we knit the yarn over together with this stitch to eliminate our extra yarn over, the extra stitch, and to close that gap between the yarn over and this stitch. After we have knitted our sprout, we ended up with 102 stitches on the needles. We counted that. 102 stitches must be a multiple of 4 because I use a 2x2 ribbing. But 102 stitches is not a multiple of 4. It does not divide evenly by 4. Therefore, I subtracted 2 stitches in the last row, I think, and I got 100 stitches. 100 stitches divides evenly by 4. After that, we can start knitting the neckline. So, we take smaller needles, those needles with which we knitted all our ribbings. For me, that is 3.5, and we knit a false edge. I have a separate lesson on how this part is done. Go above and check it out. After knitting the false edge, I knitted 8 rows of a 2x2 ribbing. In each row, I applied the binding off and closed the ribbing with a needle. I also have a lesson on such a closure. Here's the link above. After we have closed and knitted our neckline, what do? We do not forget about the holes that we have left near the underarms. There are 2 holes. Here are 2, and here are 2. We simply sew them up with a thread and hide all the ends. This concludes our knitting. The sweater is ready, and it can be washed, dried, and worn. I hope you succeed in everything. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this video with friends, and also subscribe to my second vlog channel. There will also be a link below the video. I wish you pleasant knitting, and I will see you very soon in my next masterclass. Bye everyone.